The Audio Train programme is supported by the following businesses. Tysers, a leading media insurance company. Garment Printing, supplier of printed clothing and branded merchandise. Prager Metis, an international advisory and accounting firm. AV Resilience, a supplier of technical consultancy and broadcast equipment. Mint & Co, a dynamic legal and business affairs company. And NoteTracks, a platform for audio producers, engineers and collaborators to take notes, get feedback and share projects. Audio Train is part of Audio UK, the trade association for professional audio production companies.
Hello, welcome to this evening's Audio Train webinar. Audio Train is part of Audio UK and we'll be talking more about Audio UK as part of this event. Tonight you have the opportunity to ask questions about the independent audio production sector. Whether it's job opportunities, creative ideas, maybe you want to start your own company, or if you just want to find out who's who, then please put your questions on the Q&A button on Zoom and we'll be coming to them later. But first, let me introduce Leona Fensome from Inkslingers Media, who will be hosting today and introducing our panel of directors and owners of audio indie companies. Leona, welcome to Audio Train. Tell us first, how did you get into the business and why did you decide to set up your own company?
Yeah, thank you, Caroline, and thanks everyone for joining. I got into radio quite late in life, actually. About a decade ago, I was a features journalist in Australia working in women's consumer magazines, business publications and entertainment publications, and I did my undergrad degree in communications. And at the time, some of my lecturers said to me, community media is a really good place to get practical experience. I went to my local community station and that's where I started cutting my teeth in magazine format radio. I worked in production as an assistant producer and then worked my way up to talks producer, moved over to the UK about 4 years ago with a lofty dream to work for the BBC, and I managed to get into BBC Radio 2 and Radio 4 in magazine format radio, and then I completely moved into radio from there, into producer roles. In terms of being an independent production company, I set myself up about 3 years ago because I realised that I needed to start stepping away from being a freelancer and perhaps becoming more self-employed so I could take on different projects. And so that's where I found myself with Inkslingers Media. It was a tricky journey because it's hard to know where to start. But since then, I've now diversified what I do. So I work in oral history production. I still do magazine format radio. And I also work in radio programs and podcast production. So I guess for me, one of the biggest things was, what was the independent radio production sector and what was an independent production company. But we've got three guests today that will share more about that with you. We have Mel Harris from Sparklab Productions, Bernard Achampong, founder and director of We Are Unedited, and Richard Berry, who is the director of Loftus Media. Welcome to you all and thank you for being part of the panel. Bernard, I'm going to fling the first question to you.
Sure.
What is the independent audio production sector? Who are these people that work in these indie companies?
Well, traditionally there was the BBC and everyone else. And the BBC produces their stuff in-house and then invite other independent companies to come in. But these are people who aren't linked to a big broadcaster, so they're not linked to a Spotify or a BBC or any other mainstream broadcaster or distributor. These are people that set out their own stall, create their own ideas or work on commission to produce audio content, either to distribute themselves individually as independent or in partnership with one of the big distributors.
And Richard, can you tell us a bit more about what you do within this sector at Loftus Media?
We basically, to sort of going back our history, we became one of the first independent audio production companies in the UK back in 1997. We were founded by Nigel Akerson, and we effectively work with broadcasters, mainly the BBC. We work with charities, arts and cultural institutions, a wide gamut, really, of clients, which has certainly exploded over the last sort of 5 or 6 years as audio has become more prevalent and interesting to brands beyond traditional broadcasters. So, yeah, we work across the board.
And coming back to you, how did you set up We Are Unedited? What was the impetus for you to create your own company?
So I think whenever you work for someone else, you always dream of that day when you're going to set up your own, right? Because you've had a frustrating day. You had a great idea that your boss turned down. And I was having one of those days. I was working at the BBC. I'd been with the BBC for close to 15 years by then. And I met Andrew, who is my business partner, over, I think it was after work. We were having a bit of a moan. And I said, I'm just going to go off and set up my own company. And he said, why don't you? It was also around the time when the Mark Duggan UK riots issue happened. And I was working in a newsroom, and I'd seen the news on my social media timeline first. And I thought, actually, here's an opportunity for me to really contribute something unique to what the BBC was talking about. I understand the background and history to this story, things like police brutality in the Black community, which we now know on a larger scale with things like the George Floyd story. The UK's own history of injustices and names like Sherry Gross and Smiley Culture and Sean Rigg. And when I came into the office, the editorial narrative was more around the destruction of public property and violence and rioting, and none of that backstory, I guess. And so for me, that was the indication that said, if I don't set up my own company, I will always be telling a story through an existing editor, which is where the name came from, Unedited, which means not having to go through an editor to tell your own story, being able to tell our own stories freely from our own perspectives.
Mel, you've also got a brilliant production company name, Sparklab. Could you tell us what was your journey into setting yourself up?
Sure. I mean, it's called Sparklab because once upon a time we had an office in a street called Sparkle Street, so it kind of made sense. And indeed, the person we sublet from was called Jeremy Shine, so everything came together. We've long since moved from there, but the name has stuck. I mean, like Bernard, I was in the BBC for about 15 years and I left. And then I was asked to come back and produce and direct a radio drama, which was my specialism and probably still is. And I thought, when I got the fee, I thought, that's not very much money. I'd rather have the whole budget and spend it how I think fit. So it was pretty straightforward, really. And it was a while ago, so it was fairly easy to just set myself up as a business and begin pitching direct to the BBC. And what is fantastic, as both the other speakers have said, is how many more opportunities there are and platforms to make audio for. Audio is really sexy. I mean, I know people go on about we're in a golden age, but we truly are. It's incredible, the number of outlets and people looking for really good audio. I mean, we've made stuff for museums, outdoor kind of cultural walks. We make podcasts, audiobooks, features, docs. We work for Audible. We work for Spotify. We're beginning to do some work for Storyglass, Fremantle, as well as the BBC, of course, and some of the other big players. So it's great. It's a great time to be doing it.
Mel, you do a whole range of creative outputs now that you're no longer at the BBC, and I've noticed that's something that is quite a pattern now. A lot of BBC people or people from bigger organisations are defecting and setting themselves up as independents. Can you remember when you left the BBC, what that was like, making that leap, and what sort of skills you had to really pluck on to get yourself going as Sparklab Productions?
It wasn't overnight, and especially I'm a small company. We don't have that many people on the payroll, but we have a fantastic big family, I would say, who are predominantly freelancers who dip in and out of all kinds of stuff. And, you know, your programs are only as good as the people who make them and the connections they have and the access they have and the skills they have. So I think, you know, we invest in that. We do as much as we can to maintain our family and nourish our family and welcome ideas from people who pitch through us and want to work with us. But it takes a while. You've got to keep going. You've got to, these are hard times when you can't get out there and network and knock on doors and stuff. You have to find other smart ways you have to have good ideas. Ideas are the currency, really, of this world. And you have to not be too precious about your ideas too, I would say. Have lots of ideas.
Richard,
have more than 10 ideas.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Richard, can we talk about ideas? Because that seems to be the bane of our existence sometimes. What would your insights be to people that are perhaps wanting to become an indie about that whole process, which is often undervalued at times because you do invest a lot of work into it, taking an idea to development to working it up?
I mean, you know, Mel's absolutely right. Ideas are our lifeblood, they're our currency, and without them, we're nothing. So we're always welcoming people to get in touch with us, bring their ideas. We're always looking for authentic stories. We're not short of ideas. The interesting thing is, you know, whenever we go to our development list, we've got a huge list of ideas. The important thing is knowing, you know, it's not just having a good idea, but knowing how you're going to tell it. And that's the kind of thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about. You know, formats, for example, are really important in terms of getting commissions. What is the format for this idea? You know, how will this extend beyond maybe a one-off? Could this be a series? So it's essentially thinking about formats, thinking about narrative arcs, thinking about how you're going to approach stories. But yeah, I mean, we're really lucky at Loftus as well. We have a great network, and we have lots of really interesting, sort of robust, vibrant ideas sessions on a very regular basis. It's about it's the filtering, which is the interesting thing for us in terms of, you know, what gets through and what doesn't get through. You know, sort of weighing that up against what commissioners are looking for versus ideas we're really passionate about that we could potentially fund ourselves. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
It's a very unpredictable and can be at times unstructured process being an independent, Richard, and you've outlined, I imagine, what's a very well-versed machine now in your production company. What would be your tips to people to help themselves get set up? Because it can be overwhelming. You've got to set the business up, manage your financials, pitch for work, have a process. If we take it right back to, you know, the early days, what would be your suggestions?
Think about, do you really want to do it on your own? I mean, I would think about, you know, finding a really good network. Because, you know, we've all been, you know, when I left the BBC, I came to Loftus, as I said, was established a long time before I joined. But when I left the BBC, I set up on my own, and it's very lonely, sort of staring at the kitchen wall, looking for ideas. And what really helped me was just finding people who were in a similar boat and building up a network so that you could share ideas, you could help each other out. So for me, my first tip would be, you know, find other like-minded people who are looking to do a similar thing, and, you know, so that you can share resources, basically. I think that would be that, you know, that's invaluable, because it can be very lonely starting a business from scratch on your own.
Bernard, you've got a good team there at We Are Unedited now. Can you talk us through what some of the roles are within We Are Unedited and how they came to be and what people are doing?
Yeah, so the team is myself and Andrew, just the two of us, two directors. Everyone else is a freelancer. And we decided what we were going to do by, you know, we started off, well, what is an invoice? Who knows how to put an invoice together? And just worked it out between us. And very quickly, we decided to delegate a lot of the stuff that we didn't feel were core to our business. And I our business is ideas generation. Our business is really generating IP, whether it's for audio or for TV, as we've just stepped into. So we decided very early on, get yourself a good accountant, because we don't want to be bogged down with doing that bit, and get someone who understands the business affairs side, going through contract and so on, because we also didn't want to get bogged down in that bit. We just wanted to be able to focus on doing the work that comes with getting a great idea, turn it into a format, and then delivering it. So very quickly we decided, let's find other people who do the other bits. And I think that's one of the challenges when you're setting up a company. Very early on, you feel like you have to control everything and you have to be over everything. And, things like the Audio Content Fund helped us through Audio UK, because we found out about it through Audio UK. We joined Audio UK simply to find resources. So who were the lawyers that they recommended? Who were the accountants they recommended? Were there any templates for contracts and forms and agreements that we could crib? So that's the way we got to find out a lot of the resources that helped build our business up.
You mentioned TV, and we did have someone email through a question to us, so thank you for that. They asked how much of a divide there is now between working on audio and television projects, such as like a producer or researcher. They're looking to work in audiovisual docs. They've got project management experience in audio and video content. But in their current job, they're also getting experience in short doc making and in local radio, and they want to know what other steps would you recommend for them to get further down the line with that?
I think understanding what your idea is key. So your idea is the raw egg, right? You can decide whether you're going to boil it, whether you're going to fry it, you're going to scramble it. As long as you understand what your raw idea truly is, the real essence of your idea is, then you can partner with people. So we had to partner with a TV production company because we had a raw idea, which we were originally going to do as a podcast. And when we went to the commissioner, they said, have you considered it for TV? And we said, no, but we can work with a production company who could help us shape that. So really being clear on what your idea is going to be key. And then when you're taking it to different markets, there are going to be people who have experience. There are going to be people who've made those mistakes before. Try and find someone that you trust and you feel comfortable with and work with them. Otherwise, it's a really long learning curve and you might kill your idea for the lack of, having the patience to go through those hurdles. Our first TV production wasn't a nightmare because we had a great team around us. But it was a massive steep learning curve because there was a lot of things we didn't understand about the way TV works. I mean, if I wanted to make a radio program today, I've got my H5 there and a microphone. I'll just get on a bus and go and get it done with my laptop and sort it out in Starbucks. You can't do that with TV. So get alongside someone who already does that kind of work, and see if they can help you really translate your idea into a TV idea.
You've raised a good point about kit, Bernard. I'll put it to all of you, but let's start with you, Bernard. What does a freelancer need or an indie need in terms of kit?
Yeah, there's so much you can do. I say because I want to make a good quality audio, I've got a very good couple of microphones. I've got a great condenser mic and a great dynamic mic and a good recorder. And I've got my H5. I've also got my Roland. People still use Tascams. But as long as you've got those and a decent pair of headphones, I always cringe when I see people recording stuff without headphones. You wouldn't take a photo without looking at the viewfinder, so why would you record anything without headphones on? And that's pretty much what you need, and something to edit on. And I've seen people editing on phones, which I still haven't managed to do just yet, but I know it can be done. People can create some great work on just that basic piece of kit.
Mel, you do a whole range of work. What are your thoughts on kit and what people need?
Well, I think if you're going to be completely self-op and you're collecting stories kind of quickly in real places, I mean, look, no one's allowed to touch my Sony PCM. No one is allowed to borrow that. But we do have in the company, we have Zoom H4Ns, we have Zoom H6s, and you can buy. And I would say if you're serious about being any kind of broadcast journalist, anybody who wants to collect stories, then you need to have, you can start with an H4n, and it's, it's a great entry-level, affordable piece of kit. You can record great stuff on that, and then you can go up. Everyone's got their favourites. For me, it's the Sony. But drama is another story. We're a bit like queens. We're a bit like sort of the queen in drama. We don't do anything too technical, because it's complicated. You've got too many people. You've got too many voices. You've got a very limited time. It's like a piece of filming. And I use someone who knows what they're doing, so I can concentrate on direction and working with actors and text. And that has to be a totally professional, organisation, really, in terms of the setup. And the same with post-production. Yeah.
Richard, do you do anything different?
Mel and Bernard have pretty much covered it. I just add that when freelancers come to work at Loftus, we will lend them kit. So, it's not that you necessarily have to buy you have to buy all this yourself when you come to work with an indie. We will help and kit people out properly.
Another question I want to put to all of you, and Richard, we'll start with you. This came through to us, and it's about career change later in life. I guess much like what I did. We've got an audience member who's in his 50s and is looking for a career change. He's worked in communications for a long time, mainly doing radio interviews, and he's a keen radio listener. He runs his own website with podcasts and has several other ad hoc podcasts, but doesn't have any actual radio experience or qualifications. Richard, what would be your advice to someone like that who's had maybe a corporate career or a completely different career and wants to start cutting a path in the audio industry?
I think it's about starting to network and coming and talking to indies in particular, to just to sort of chew the fat to find out what kind of experience they might need. Ideally, come with a really good idea. Come with an idea. Come with your ideas. Come and talk about what interests you. Perhaps if that person is making stuff already, then maybe make a highlights reel. But come with some sort of direct questions. Areas that he or she is particularly interested in working in, so that we can start and have a constructive conversation. But our doors are always open to people with good ideas. And we've had a similar scenario recently, actually, where someone's come with what we think is a brilliant idea. They've never worked in audio before, and they are sort of going towards the end of their first career, as it were. So it's about meeting people, making calls, sending speculative emails, because we do read these emails and we do take these calls, and it's just getting in there, really.
Bernard, what would be your suggestions for someone who's braving the decision to enter into the audio industry?
I would say follow your passion. I left an engineering career at the age of 30 to join the BBC. And I was so in the corporate world that I joined One Extra on the first day wearing a full suit, which my colleagues still laugh about. But I feel that if you've got the passion for audio in you, it will always catch up with you no matter where you are. And Absolutely. Like Richard said, just find someone who can share your passion. Even if it's just someone who you can talk to about and someone who gets it. There are so many avenues to get, if you go to YouTube now, you'll get so many tips and tricks of how to record stuff yourself. If you go into Google, there are so many different forums and platforms. Just start networking with people who share your passion. And that will help you start to create that structure around how you make your dreams come reality.
Mel, how about you? You left a long career at the BBC to do something quite similar, set yourself up in your own company. What would be your advice?
I think you're right. If you're passionate about something, you need to follow the dream as far as you can. And there's many guides and all kinds of help out there. But I think to decide to make a career in it is perhaps a little. I think you have to manage your expectations. There are not many people who have real jobs in audio. to be truthful. There's a freelance army, and all of us who run our own companies are utterly reliant on that. So you need to get some experience. You need to make stuff. You need to, put some stuff out there, set up a website, even if it's just a sound page somewhere. And you need to really, really, really want to do it. You need to practice and get good. And if you approach individual companies, you need to know who they are and what they make and what they do. You need to listen to their stuff. We get approaches all the time, and the kind of dear company, not even finding out my name or not even checking my website and seeing what we make, it won't cut through. You have to want to make the stuff more than you want the career, in a sense. And you want to, you need to show evidence of that. And the great thing about audio, the reason why I love it, and I took a decision years ago not to try and even go into TV, because I thought, what do I do well? What can I do? What do I like doing most? What can I get really good at? And it's audio production. But everybody does everything in audio. That's the great thing about it. We wrote people in off the street to do a little drop-in voice thing that we might need. We record our dogs, our babies, the birds outside in the woods, and if people come into my office, which obviously is not this children's room I'm in at the moment, but, in the old days or the new days coming forward, is, you've got to be willing to make a cup of tea as much as, get on Pro Tools and start editing, whatever it is you want to use. We're all in it together, and we all bounce off each other, and you have to just be prepared to pull the train, all across the board. And that's the great fun thing about it. Yeah.
I'd like to talk to each of you about highs and lows. Yeah, please go ahead, Bernard. Yeah,
I was just going to echo what Mel said. Making it is the thing that really convinces you that you are passionate about this. I was listening to a podcast this week, and a rapper, Yassine Bey, said, if you love music enough, at some point you'd have tried to make it yourself. You'd have tried to write a song yourself or play an instrument. And I think it's the same for audio. If you like it enough, you would have created something. And if you don't have that drive to create something yourself, without an organization behind you or without a commission, then you should probably rethink whether this is really your dream or just something you'd like to try out.
Absolutely. And I'd like to draw on that and talk about highs and lows as well from each of you, because often we learn a lot, don't we, when we hear from people what those moments were where they really were like, yes, that was fantastic, I'm so glad I managed to do that, but then also challenging times. So can you think back to the time that you've had each of your independent production companies and talk to, I guess, a real high point and a real low point? Like, I know for me, having been a freelancer for such a long time, there's been real high points where I can use time really well, because you're so used to just having small bits of time and making the most of it. And also collaborations seem to be quite a thing now, where you align yourself with like-minded audio people and you go on to do great work. And then low points really, I guess, are all of the development stuff. It's really laborious sometimes. Richard, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it there. The things that come to mind in terms of low points are when you have we had an idea that we've really passionate about. We want to make, and it's actually been through probably 3 different commissioners, 3 different places. And it's been turned down at various sort of stages of the pre-production process at each place, and it can become really demoralizing when you have an idea you absolutely believe in, and the team around you do too, and for one reason or another, maybe one situation we had the UK commissioner completely behind it, ready to sign the contract for us to make it, but there's a staff change in the New York office and the strategy changes overnight and they don't want it anymore, and so the whole team is deflated, and you have to pick yourselves up and find a new home for it, and you take it to another home, and then maybe something happens there, and we're with this particular thing that I'm thinking about, we're at a stage now where it doesn't have a home again, but we still all really believe in it. So it's about, how you sort of deal with those low moments, and how you pick yourself up, and how you carry on. So yeah, I suppose that's a good example of when it's low. Obviously, losing commissions as well. We've been in situations where we might have made something for many years, and then it comes up for tender, and then you lose it, and you're not making it anymore. That's not very nice. And then on the flip side, winning commissions is amazing. We've had some great highs where things have got off the ground. And in terms of sort of more personal to the company, when the team, we've had some great moments when the team are really gelling, and it feels like we're really going places because the team is at one, and there's a real synergy between us all. That's when it feels really, really good. So it's not just when we're winning things, but when as a company where we feel like we're in a really good place, we're in sync with our values, and things are looking bright. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Richard. We've got lots of questions coming through from the audience, so I will just park your highs and lows, Mel and Bernard. Caroline, have we got some things from people that are having a listen to us all?
We've got lots of questions come in, so hopefully I might have time to get back to the four of you discussing other issues, but I thought we'd turn to what the audience is asking. There's quite a number of freelancers out there, so there are a number of questions along the same theme of getting work from you as independent producers. So just starting, Bernard, I think if we could start with this one, what advice would you give to a freelancer looking to get a foot in the door at an indie but is lacking in experience? This person has been making many podcasts for people for free and volunteering at radio stations, but they're struggling to find any paid opportunities.
It's a common one. And it's not an easy one to answer. For us, what we do is we have a season of development, and then we go out and try to win work. So often it's not a case of you can come to us and we've always got work, or we've always got position. It's more for us about finding us in the right window between when a commissioner has said yes and we need people to start working on something. So it would be really just making sure that we know you're available and keeping that conversation with us, keeping us updated on the work that you're doing, but also showing us the quality of your work, showing us the value that you're going to bring to our project. One of the things that I did, which helped me get a job, with ITN Productions, was I knew they were working on a new crime series and they were looking for producers. So I produced an intro and sent it to them. And when they heard it, they said that they felt I really got where they were trying to go with it, and that got me the job. So try and find out what the company that you're speaking to or you want to get involved with are doing. Send them an example of your work that fits into what they do. Take a piece of their content and remix it, if you like, and send it back to them so that they're aware of who you are. I don't know how anyone else works, but we're such a small organization that, we live or die on the commissions that we win. And if we don't get help from a commissioner saying, yes, go for it, we aren't able to employ anyone else. So I would say for us, make yourself known to us, but make yourself known not just by your CV, by saying, hey guys, I know you did something on the rap game. Here's my take on what I would have done with that interview.
This is a linked question, and actually, Richard, I think one for you, because I think that possibly this person has tried to get through your front door, so to speak, okay. But asking, saying they keep falling at the hurdle of simply getting past the foyer with independence, and the sort of virtual foyer, if you like, at the moment. So how do you like the approaches? Do you want a pitch coming into you? Do you want a phone call? Do you want people turning up at your offices? What's the best way to get that foot in the door if you can't get anyone to respond to you?
So, I'd say the first, send an email to start with. If that doesn't get picked up, and it should, then follow up with another email. If that doesn't get picked up, then give us a call. And we will always pick up the phone, as well as reply to emails. So, I be persistent, but be very clear. As Mel said earlier, it's very obvious when someone sends in a request and it's kind of like a boilerplate. It could have gone to any indie production company. The things that will sort of make us take notice will be where somebody has clearly taken time, to understand our company. They're very clear about why they are therefore approaching us, and that they are clear about what they want to talk about, that they have a specific idea. Be very specific, and keep calling.
Okay, as another link, I'm trying to keep to this theme, but just explore sort of slightly different sides of it. Maria would like to know, she's a freelancer working mainly for the BBC and also doing some word trails and museum audio. But what's the best way to connect with an indie, and how do you choose which indie to go for?
Okay. Well, you need to check out people's websites and see who's making work that looks interesting to you, and then listen to some of it. I always say, send me an email. Okay, golden rules. Don't make me scroll. Make it short. Right? It has to just pop up on my screen. I mean, I don't want to sound unfriendly, but producers, especially those running their own companies, are really, really, really busy. And so make it easy for me to read your email. Put your question first. Make that the first line. Make a request. What are you asking me for? I can't tell you how many emails I read through and it says, so this, so that. So I was wondering if, well, perhaps, maybe. Put the question at the front. I'd love to come and work with you. I'd love to come and have a cup of coffee with you. I'd really appreciate the chance to talk to you. I love what you do. I listen to this. I have an idea about that. Be clear, be straightforward, and do your thinking first and your research first before you make any approach to anybody, and have something to offer. Make yourself stand out. Why would I choose you above, the 500 others that have emailed me in the last 2 months? And in my world, I'm not just dealing with people who want to come and work in the sector as potential producers. I'm also fielding requests from, I can't tell you how many actors looking for drama work, how many writers looking for commissions. Mm. So, you have to really think about what is it you want? How could I, be clear, make it something I can respond to, and be brief. Thank you.
This next one, again, is linked to sort of roles and what you can get and what you can hope to apply for. This is from Anya. She worked as a production coordinator in BBC Radio and would like to know, is there an equivalent of this role in the production sector in indie companies? And what other jobs apart from producers are there in the structure? Perhaps it might be an idea just for each. Mel, would you like to start that one off?
I'd love to start that one off, because actually through Kickstart, the new government training scheme, we're just taking on somebody to train up as a production coordinator. I've got a very big 10-part drama series to make later this year for Radio 4. And it's just a great opportunity, a real world opportunity to bring somebody on. I would say, this is terribly simplistic and I might get shouted down for this, but I would say there are 2 jobs in audio production. You either make programs or you help someone else make programs. And that's what a production coordinator does. And the other roles, researcher, social media, especially for people my age. It's great to have younger people who are really, really au fait with how to get the word out there about the stuff we're doing across all the social media channels. I think, obviously, editing skills. Since we started doing audiobooks, we're creating jobs all the time for directors, editors, actors, obviously. So what's your skill? What do you want to do? Get good at it and make your approaches accordingly.
Leona, just bringing you in, do you agree with Mel? Are there any additional roles in the companies that you work in?
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I've branched out into oral history production. So it's got a lot of similarities to producing radio programs and podcast series. However, I guess the similarity to radio would be deep research. So researchers are always highly valuable to any project, really, that has, I guess, an extended element to it. as well as someone who is like a PC, like a production coordinator that can manage the project, the finances and all of the moving parts of it, as well as, like I think we talked about early on, sound design as well, someone that can do the sound design if there's, Atmos and actuality and other things other than speech elements that need to be put into the program. For me, I'm very much a speech radio person, so they're not my strengths when it comes to production. So yeah, I guess it really depends on the nature of the program or the style of the project that you're working on, what the audio output is, because in oral history now, there's much more of a demand for podcast and radio series to be produced as part of exhibitions and walking tours and things like that. So I think freelancers or people coming out of the BBC can look at varied elements of the audio world now to get into, depending on what they want to do.
And can I just ask, assuming those are the roles, where do you advertise the roles? Richard, do you want to talk about how you get people when you want them?
Yeah. So we're always trying to cast the net far and wide. We use our social media. So for example, Loftus, we have LinkedIn, we use Twitter. We recently advertised on a website called The Dots. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but that is a really great site for media jobs. So there's The Dots. We obviously use Audio UK as well, which is a wonderful resource. So we can put job ads on there. We subscribe to there's various newsletters like Pod News. They have a job section, so we'll advertise through there. We just try and use as much of our network as possible to get the word out. So I'm just trying to think where else. Forums. Somebody mentioned, I think it was before we started the Sound Women Facebook group. Forums like that where we can advertise, we will do as well.
Bernard, if you get an awful lot of people applying to you or wanting to work with you, how can they make their applications stand out?
I think what you've got to do is make my job easy to pick you. So if we're advertising for a football factual series, make sure that your submission, your application stands out as a football factual series. Don't give me everything that I need to know about you working on music or working in culture. Be very clear. If you know what it is, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about any job that we put out. If you know what it is that we want, give us some information, sell that value. It's always important for us to know that you're going to join us and add value to the project rather than just be a producer or a production coordinator because you're a good production coordinator. I would much rather you say, I've only worked on 2 sports projects, but I'm the world's biggest sports fan and I really know what I'm doing here, rather than saying, I've been working all year, I'm the most expensive producer and I can turn my hand to anything.
Bernard, you've raised the, just very briefly there, the issue about what people get paid.
Yeah.
Can I ask sort of what guidance do people have, or do you give, what people should expect to be paid in various roles?
Well, for us, it's quite easy for us because when we create our budgets have a figure attached to it. And that depends on it's largely based on our experience with either working with the BBC or one of the distribution streaming services or private clients. So we have a ballpark of, if we're working with a corporate, it could be this. But those figures, those rates are also based on how much of the IP do you bring to the table, or how much of the IP do the broadcasters own. So there is no such thing as a producer fee, so to speak. We have ways of negotiating that. So if, for instance, we put out a job and we've budgeted £300 a day, and you say, well, my rate is £350 a day, but I'm really interested in the project. My negotiation with you would be, for that production fee budget, could you work fewer days and get it done so that we could give you the same amount of money, but you work fewer days, you get the money that you're equivalent of £350, for instance, but do the project in fewer days. Again, it's not so much about arguing about whether you're worth 200 or 300. It's more about, can you get the work done and can we deliver for this budget that we have allocated?
And I think, Leona, it's true that you can have put out there some sort of guidance on the different roles and what can be expected in the way of, financial. Well, it is ranges actually, or for different roles and what can be expected. I'm just going to move on here to some just other questions about which are sort of linked. But what roles or skill sets are most in demand? Mel, you touched on social media for you, but do you have any? Do you have any other roles or skill sets that you think are kind of more valuable than others, where you have much more choice?
I would just say that Leona mentioned, moving parts. Any production is like spinning plates, really, and so you've got to have really good organisational skills. And everyone can say, I've got great organisational skills, but you have to be able to demonstrate that to me and not get phased under pressure. I've got two working definitions of what makes a good producer. One is someone who brings the best people together to make fantastic things happen, right? You just find the best talent you can, bring it all together and boom, make the best programme in the world. The second definition, which feels like more of a kind of day-to-day realistic one, is fixing things that go wrong, solving problems. And you just need to have a whole kind of repertoire of plan Bs up your sleeve, really. And but you minimise those in good preparation. So attention to detail, accuracy, organisation, those things are key for us in any production. Okay,
Bernard, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think Mel said earlier on, there are two elements to this: those who make the stuff and those who help people make the stuff. And if it wasn't for our budgets getting squeezed all the time, I would recommend everyone had a production coordinator on board. Production coordinators make your life easy, but as they tend to be the people who help projects being made, when budgets get tight, those kind of roles get squeezed out or limited. And I think that's such a shame. I also think sound designers are really important now, more than they ever have been, because the audio space has become so competitive now, you really need to stand out. I mean, we're trying to make sexy factual content in Unedited, and a lot of our stuff lives or falls on how much we put into the sound design.
I'm going to move on a bit from the roles, and Andreas wants to know, what challenges do you think the indie sector is going to face over the next 3 to 5 years? Richard, can I start you off on that one?
Obviously, we said right at the start, the great thing about being in audio in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years is that there are so many more opportunities to make audio, but that means that there's so much more competition as well. So I think that, that could become challenging. I think for bigger production companies, it's challenging, when you have a more, in terms of a structure, when we're, pitching for certain things. Sometimes we find ourselves pitching, again, a company will come to us to pitch for an idea. They'll also go to a freelancer. And, we're in situations where maybe a one-person band, as it were, because the barriers to entry to make audio is, with the sort of advancement in technology is such that, it's becoming a lot easier to be the producer, to be the SM, to do the, the sound design, to be the exec. And that is challenging for bigger companies because we have structures such that we have production coordinators, et cetera. So as the costs come down, that becomes challenging for us, if that makes sense. I think that's probably, off the top of my head, that's probably one of the main ones.
There is a question which sort of may or may not be related, but there was news within the last week about something else, which is being acquired by Sony, and they're asking what you think about that. Leona, do you want to have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'd like to see how that transpires, but I guess that's on a much larger scale than what I'm about to highlight, and I think there's strength in numbers. So I guess over this whole lockdown period, what I've found myself and other indies are doing more so is collaboration. So the half a dozen projects that I've been working on across radio, podcasts and oral history have all involved me collaborating with another indie. So where I've got strengths, they've got different capacities, and it's been working really, really well in order to get your pitches up and to get those commissions and to go for the bigger bodies of work that you might not necessarily be able to do on your own or within a small team.
Chris is asking, how international is the sector? Do you get commissions from broadcasters and organisations elsewhere in Europe or overseas? Mel, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the easiest, biggest market is the States. And I mean, we're being asked to pitch ideas to a particular platform that have to work in the States. So nothing too parochially British, for example. I mean, I'd love to. I just think, I think the challenge, we think, English language, what can we do? I mean, people are translating their work. There are companies, Podium, who are big in Germany and looking for content that can be translated. People are doing that. The original long-form podcast Serial apparently was downloaded in every country in the world bar one, which makes you realise that good storytelling in whatever language is not a barrier. I think it's happening, but it's largely America led, I would say. That's where the opportunities are, the kind of the more low-hanging fruit for working internationally.
Thank you. And Neville, who has a range of questions, but I'll just pick out a few. Richard, he wants to know, is it best to start out as a sole trader, or do you need to be a limited company for certain contracts?
I think that probably it's easier to start out as a sole trader, but there will certainly be some contracts where they will require you to be limited. So I think probably starting out as a sole trader gives you sort of a taste of going on your own and understanding, what it is like to run a business. And then you could probably progress to limited company. I don't think it's essential. And again, as we've touched on earlier, it could be that if there is a contract that comes along that is requiring you to be a limited company, you could potentially partner with a limited company. So obviously, a limited company is much more not complicated, but sophisticated in terms of the things that you have to, take into account in terms of, whether that be accounting, tax. It's certainly probably more complicated to start with than going the sole trader route, in my opinion.
For the big companies, though, do you have to have a company? So the BBC, you have to have a company, don't you, in order to get on their lists, their supplier lists?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. And there's certain contracts that we have with the BBC whereby you have to have at least 3.5 times turnover of the value of the contract. And that's to guarantee to the BBC that you're just going to sort of go under overnight and you can pay everybody. So, you would need to be a certain size, yeah.
Okay. Neville is also asking about showreel versus CV. Does that ideally mean that you need a website? Leona, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think if you're able to cut your CV down to a one-page dashboard that can highlight, your portfolio, as well as then having a link to your show reel of a couple of minutes of all of your best bits of work that give a good snapshot as to what you can do. So then perhaps you don't necessarily have to have a website, although, you can set up a landing page for free with most website platforms, or you could use SoundCloud, Mixcloud. I think that definitely helps production companies see at a glance, to everyone's point about being really busy because they've got so many competing projects on. It just helps people see, right away what you can do and what your expertise is.
Just a real quickie here. Is anyone aware of any indies in the deep southwest Devon, Cornwall area? Bit of silence.
I know producers out that way, but I don't know about indies.
No. Okay.
But I'm sure there is. That would be a good question for Audio UK.
Yeah, and
sorry,
just a quick,
the UCAN group.
just a quickie on that. There's a film production company, kind of training company called Calling the Shots, based in Bristol, and they came to me in Manchester to roll out a whole load of audio training for them for the BBC Arts Council scheme. So they will know. They couldn't find anybody, which is why they came to me initially, but there will be people down there. Try Calling the Shots, check their website and email them. There's a tip.
Mel, while we're talking about Audio UK, could you just say a little bit about what Audio UK does and why it's important that people know about it?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're setting up, get on their website, get on their page, and if you can afford to join, you won't be sorry. It gives you access to so many resources. Audio UK are the trade body for the independent audio production sector, and they do so many things that we're not aware of. They lobby behind the scenes, they absolutely pressurise the BBC on all the important things. They've won really important victories for us in terms of owning our own programmes, contracts and all kinds of stuff. They talk to government. They, together with another partner, they created the Audio Content Fund from DCMS. Many things. They run a wonderful awards scheme each year that rewards production talent, not just programme making, the eventual end programme. They're just a great outfit, and if you're serious about becoming an independent producer, and especially setting your own company, you need to get with the programme, which is Audio UK.
That's a really good plug. Thank you. Right, we're coming to the end of the session now, and apologies if I haven't quite got to all the questions, but I hope I've really covered the sort of main range. It would be good to finish off with each of you telling us what would be your top tip, given that our audience, a large number of them are freelancers out there and obviously very, very keen to work with you. So what would be your top tip? Mel, could I start with you?
I knew you were going to say that. I've got a lot of top tips. I would say, just clarity. Try and be clear about what your strengths are, what you can offer me. Offer my company, and so why you want to do it and what you're going to bring to the table. And we all need you. We need all these young talented freelancers, or not just young, older too. We need people with great ideas and with passion and energy and fresh ways of thinking and approaching stories. So it's not all one way. We need you too, but find a way of cutting through and work on that.
Bernard.
I'm going to have that real conversation. Don't be afraid to collaborate. And I say don't be afraid to collaborate because sometimes we don't want to talk about money. We don't know what we think we're worth. We're not sure if we collaborate or partner with someone, whether they're going to own our idea or, they're going to have a bigger stake in the idea. I think the way you win in this sector is by partnering with people like Mel and people like Richard, who are established and will be able to help you get along to the next stage of your own growth. But in order to do that, you've got to understand the industry as is. So do some work on understanding your rights. Have really open conversations around, well, if I work with you, what does it mean? How much do we get? How much do you get? It's okay to have those conversations if someone's willing to partner with you and work with you. Because once you've got those conversations out of the way, it opens up your success. It opens up the opportunities for you. And if you can't really do that yourself, get involved with Audio UK. And they've got a partnership with Mint & Co., who are a business affairs group, and they do all of those conversations for us. So partner, collaborate with people, but be bold enough to talk about the money side of it too.
Richard, have you got anything to add to that? Your top tips?
I just say, in terms of your own ideas, really listen critically to as much as you can, and maybe we do a thing at Loftus where we have like a podcast listening club where it's kind of like a book club, but where we're really listening hard to everything that's out there and really pulling it apart and thinking, why is that good? Why did that work? Why don't we like that? So I think in terms of your own ideas, really, it will really help sort of things that you are developing if you listen as critically as possible to other output. And really, as I said earlier, really think about format, because format is so important. Think about how you're going to tell the story, how you're going to approach it. There's that analogy about, why don't you come in through the window rather than the door? Just really focus on that, because that will really help sharpen your ideas, and then, they're more likely to get picked up when they come through to us.
And Leona, final thoughts to you?
You've really got to know what you want to do. That's probably the biggest thing. It took me a long time to realise, that I was a magazine format radio person, that I was in speech radio, because that's what I love doing. Because when the work's on, you've got to love doing what you're doing, because it will be challenging and stressful. And when the work's not on, that's what you're chasing. So that would be my advice: is spend some time, talk to people, find out whether you're a producer, a creator, what it is that you really want to be actually working on making.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much to Mel Harris, Sparklab Productions, Bernard P. Achampong, Unedited, Richard Berry from Loftus, and of course our host for this evening, Leona Fensome, Inkslingers Media. If you want to know more about Audio UK and the work that it does for the independent production sector, then go to the Audio UK website. I will also be sending out a little pamphlet to you which explains everything you need to know about Audio UK. So Audio Train is taking a break during July and August, but it'll be back again in September with a range of sessions, including one we're already advertising, which is a Trade Secrets with George the Poet and Ben Brick, his producer. And that'll be a real treat. So please sign up as soon as possible. But until the autumn, goodbye.